So today I thought it'd be fun to keep reading the story that we started before we had to leave school, Colossal Fossil. We were ready to start chapter 9, and just in case you don't remember what happened, here's a little recap. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose had gone to Boston. They were having a sleepover at the Boston Children's Museum. They were there with a whole bunch of other children and Dink's dad and some other parents, and they were allowed to go and search for the museum and go with their chaperone. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose's chaperone was Sylvia. And they were exploring all of the exhibits and seeing this huge dinosaur skeleton. And also on display was this incredibly rare river diamond. And in the middle of the night, there was a huge crash. Everybody ran in, and part of the fossil had fallen over, and in the process had knocked over the river diamond. Well, when the river diamond got put back, one of the little boys, Alex, noticed that there were scratches on the diamond. And he knew diamonds could not be scratched. So he was suspicious that the river diamond was actually stolen, and that was a fake. And Dink found straight black hairs on his sleeping bag. And so they were trying to figure out who these straight black hairs belonged to, because maybe that was the person that stole the river diamond. Now their chaperone Sylvia, straight black hair. She had a brother who worked also at the museum, Trevor, straight black hair. So the kids were going to take the hairs to Trevor and see if he could figure out who they belonged to, but they weren't sure if maybe he was really the thief. So here's chapter 9. After the kids were in the lab, Trevor closed the door and leaned against it. He folded his thick arms over his chest. "Okay, ask away," he said. "Oh no, we're trapped," Dink thought, and there were no windows. "Why did you become a scientist?" Josh asked Trevor. "I like to study things," Trevor answered. "I want to know what makes the universe work. I like to solve problems." Dink looked around the room. Everything was white and very clean, like a hospital. On top of a stainless steel table, he saw a microscope, bottles filled with different colored liquids, and a long bone. Next to the bone was a row of sharp knives. You told Dink you were a detective once," Josh said. Trevor nodded. "I studied criminology in college," he said. "Thought I'd had fun catching bad guys, but it wasn't much fun at all. Now I study old bones and try to imagine what the real beast looked like, what it ate, and how it lived and died." Dink glanced at Trevor's neatly combed black hair. Did 3 of those hairs end up on my shirt, he wondered? Did Trevor shove the fake diamond under that heavy board? "Did you learn how to take fingerprints when you were a detective?" Ruth Rose asked. "Yup." Dink took a deep breath, then asked his question. "Can you tell where a hair came from? I mean, from a certain man or woman?" "Sometimes," Trevor said. "It depends on how complete the hair is. The shaft of the hair is the part we can see. On our heads, the shafts are what we shampoo and comb. But under the scalp, on the end of each hair shaft, there's something called a follicle. This follicle has a tiny bulb that attaches the shaft to the skin. Scientists can study a follicle and learn a lot about the person the hair came from." Dink took the paper towel from his pocket and laid it on the table. He unwrapped it so they could all see the black hair against the white paper. Then he took the first 3 hairs from the anagram book and laid them next to the others on the paper towel. "Where'd you get those?" Trevor asked. Dink blinked. He didn't want to lie. Oh, they're part of a mystery we're trying to solve," Ruth Rose said. "We love mysteries. It's sort of a hobby for us." Dink swallowed. "Thank you, Ruth Rose," he thought. Trevor picked up the paper towel and held it close to his eyes. He said. He stepped over to the microscope and slid the hairs onto a little glass tray. He sat in a chair and adjusted the microscope while looking through the eyepiece at the hairs. "I thought so," he said. "Come, take a look." Dink moved over, and Trevor stood up. "Kneel in the chair so you can see," he told Dink. "Keep both eyes open, but put one against the little rubber cup." Dink followed Trevor's instructions. At first, all he saw was a dark blur. "It looks all fuzzy," he said. Trevor adjusted the knob. "Any better?" he asked. Dink pulled back. "Yes. One of the hairs looked like a tree branch with bark," he said. "I can see the follicle thing on the end. The other 3 hairs are different. They're smoother." Trevor smiled. He removed the 4 hairs and placed them back on the paper towel. Finding hairs at a crime scene is one way detectives can arrest the right person, he explained. They compare the follicles and the shafts. Only one of the 4 hairs you gave me is from a human head. Trevor folded the paper towel and handed it back to Dink. The other 3 aren't even real hair, he said. They are man-made, which means they don't have follicles and never grew out of skin. The kids just stared at him. Well, then where did they come from? Ruth Rose asked. Trevor shrugged. Probably from an article of clothing, he said. Gloves, a jacket, a fake fur collar, maybe. A thought was buzzing around Dink's brain like a bee in a bottle. The kids thanked Trevor and left the lab. Well, Mr. Detective, Josh said to Dink, what do you think? Did Trevor's eyes tell you he stole the river diamond? He could have, Dink said, but now we know the hairs you found on my shirt aren't Trevor's hairs. They aren't anyone's hairs, Ruth Rose said. They're fake, like the diamond's fake. The kids walked through the Spino room. Dink stopped and gazed up at Spino's head, which almost touched the ceiling. The workers were sitting together, taking a coffee break. He saw it all, Dink said. Josh was standing next to Dink. Who? Trevor? He asked. No, Spino, Dink said. He saw what really happened last night before the alarm went off. Spino saw who shoved the ladder, making the plank fall on top of the diamond case. Spino saw who stole the river diamond and left that fake one. Too bad dinosaurs can't talk like the ones in the movies, Josh said. Ruth Rose walked over to the river diamond exhibit. But we don't know for sure if this is a fake, she said, peering through the dome. Couldn't it be the real river diamond and Alex is just wrong? Dink joined her and looked through the dome. I think Alex is right, he said. The plank couldn't scratch a real diamond, but it could scratch a fake one. And this one definitely has a scratch on it. Now, we just have to figure out how fake hairs got on that plank, Ruth Rose said. Even if they're not human hairs, Josh said, they still could have dropped off a human. How? Ruth Rose asked. Josh shrugged. Maybe the thief works in a place that makes fake fur coats, he said. He might have some of the fake fur on his body. Or maybe the crook was wearing gorilla gloves when he moved the plank to... Oh my gosh, Dink said. Nog. Nog was wearing a caveman costume. The wig and beard were curly, but that coat thing had straight black hair all over it. And I'll bet it was fake fur. Chapter 10. You're right, Josh said. I saw a movie once where some thieves were dressed like apes. Their costumes looked just like the one Nog was wearing. If Nog lifted the plank or shoved it, some of the hairs from his costume could have been left behind, Ruth Rose said. Then when we shoved the plank, the hairs got onto your shirt. But I don't think Nog was here last night, Dink said. Did anyone see him? I didn't, Ruth Rose said. But he could have been hiding somewhere, just like Trevor could have been hiding. And then he creeps out in the middle of the night, Dink added. He makes the plank fall, grabs the river diamond, and leaves the fake one. I like it. But I thought we decided it was Trevor, Sylvia, and Dr. Worst, Josh said. That was before Trevor told us the hairs were fake, Dink said. Well, what if he's lying? Josh asked. What if Trevor realized the hairs were really his and he knew we were on to him? I think he was telling the truth, Ruth Rose said. I was watching his eyes. They didn't look sneaky. His eyes looked interested in what he was telling us. And I saw his hairs. I saw the hairs under the microscope, Dink said. The one I found in the bathroom was different from the 3 you found on my shirt. Trevor was combing his hair over the sink, so that hair was probably from his head. The other 3 weren't his, so maybe he never touched that plank. Okay, so now what do we do? Josh asked. Dink walked toward the office. We find Nog, but I'm guessing that isn't his real name, he said. A fake name, fake hairs, and a fake diamond, Josh said. If we can get some hairs from Nog's costume, we can see if they're the same ones that came from the plank and my shirt, Dink said. That would at least prove that Nog was messing with the plank. Maybe we'll catch him with the diamond, Josh said. What about fingerprints? Ruth Rose asked. If we got Nog's fingerprints, the police could see if the same fingerprints were on the fake diamond. If his fingerprints are on the fake, doesn't that prove he's the thief? Right, Dink said. How do we get his fingerprints? Josh asked. I'll think of something, Ruth Rose said. First, we have to find him. Dink knocked on the office door. Sylvia opened the door. Hi, kids, she said. Was Trevor any help? He was a lot of help, Dink said. We learned about how detectives can catch crooks by finding their hair. Sylvia touched her own hair. So? Trevor told us about artificial hair too, Ruth Rose added, like the caveman costume Nog was wearing yesterday. We'd like to talk to him about our project. Is Nog his real name? Dink asked. Sylvia laughed. No, his name is Jack. Do you know where he lives? Josh asked. No, he's never told me, Sylvia said. Well, he told us he lives near Paul Revere's house, Ruth Rose said. Oh, that's a museum, Sylvia said. Is it close enough to walk to? Ruth Rose asked. Sylvia shook her head. Not really, she said. But you can walk to where they park the swan boats. You'll find a bus stop there. Wait for one that says Paul Revere House on the little sign. If you see Jack, ask him why he didn't come to work today. The kids walked to the swan boat pond, then waited about 10 minutes for the Paul Revere House bus. Dink paid with some of the money his dad had given him, and they took seats up front. It's pretty cool to think Paul Revere hung out right here, Josh said. He might have ridden on this same bus. Maybe he sat in this seat. Dink laughed. Josh, Paul Revere died almost 200 years ago, he said. In those days, people rode on horses, not buses. Oh, I knew that, Josh said, making goofy eyes at Dink. Just playing with you. The bus stopped in front of a dark brown house. A small sign said Paul Revere lived in the house starting in 1770. The kids left the bus and walked toward the house. It was squeezed between some other old buildings. Another bus pulled up and a bunch of tourists climbed down. They walked up the sidewalk toward the house. Dink saw a restaurant, a dry cleaning place, and a flower shop. Maybe we should ask if anyone knows where Jack lives, he said. They were heading for the flower shop when they passed a bright yellow door. Ruth Rose said, Wait! She pointed to a sign that said, Your Fantasy. Rent costumes for all occasions. If Jack lives near here, maybe he got his caveman costume from this shop. In the window, they saw Elvis, a clown, and Mickey Mouse. Come on, Ruth Rose said. Inside the shop, costumes hung from hooks on the walls. They saw princesses, movie stars, even a giant chicken. Can I help you? A man asked from behind the counter. The kids stepped up to the counter. Do you have a caveman costume? Dink asked. The man nodded. Sure do, he said, but I'm afraid it's for adult sizes. Way too big for you. Can we see it anyway? Ruth Rose asked. Sure, he said. It was rented for a long time, but it just came back this morning. The man went behind a curtain and returned a few minutes later with a large, flat box. He removed the lid and laid it on the counter in front of Dink. Inside the box, the kids saw Nog's fake fur coat, shaggy beard and wig, and club, which turned out to be made of cardboard. That's what Jack was wearing, Ruth Rose said. Dink noticed a few black hairs on the inside of the box lid. He wet a finger, picked up one of the hairs, and slipped it into his pocket. Do you kids know Jack? The man asked. Yeah. We met him at the New England Children's Museum, Ruth Rose said. He was wearing this, and he said he lived near Paul Revere's house. We want to talk to him about a mystery we're trying to solve. The man nodded. Jack rented this caveman outfit for his job at the museum, he said. I don't know why he brought it back so soon. Maybe he got fired. Or if he stole the river diamond, worth millions of dollars, maybe he quit, Dink thought. And that's why he returned the costume. Stay tuned for Chapter 11.